Kofi Mensah stepped off the dusty bus in the small Ghanaian village of Ahmedzov, his heart heavy with the exhaustion of a long journey. The 12-year-old boy had been away for a month, visiting a distant cousin in Accra. His single tattered bag, slung over his shoulder, held everything he owned. As he walked toward his uncle's modest compound, he noticed something strange. His bag, the one he'd left behind, sat on the cracked sidewalk outside the gate. A crumpled note was pinned to it, the ink smudged but legible, *, "You're not welcome here anymore. Find somewhere else." Kofi's stomach dropped. His uncle, Kwame, had never been warm, but this. To cast him out without a word. 2 years ago, Kofi's parents had perished in a fishing boat accident off the coast of Volta Lake. The village whispered of curses, of bad omens. His aunt, Esi, had been the loudest, her voice sharp at the funeral. A boy who survives a boat sinking like that. He's trouble. He carries darkness. Kofi, barely 10 then, had been left to fend for himself, scavenging in the market, running errands for pennies, sleeping under the mango tree near the village square. But he had one gift, a voice so pure it could hush a crowd. When Kofi sang, it was as if the ancestors themselves paused to listen. 3 days earlier, Kofi had wandered into the Ahmedzov Community Hospital, hoping to beg for a few cedis to buy fufu. The hospital was a small, weathered building, but it was a refuge from the village's whispers. As he lingered near the entrance, he overheard 2 nurses talking in hushed tones. "Madam Akojua won't last the night," one said. "She's given up since her son died in that fire. No medicine can fix a broken spirit." Kofi's curiosity stirred. "Who's Madam Akojua?" he asked, stepping forward. The nurse, a kind woman named Adwoa, looked at him with pity. "A wealthy woman, Kofi. She used to own half the cocoa farms around here. Now she's fading away." "I can help her," Kofi said, his voice steady. The other nurse, a stern man named Kojo, laughed. "You. A dirty-footed boy." But Adwoa didn't laugh. She saw something in Kofi's eyes, resolve, maybe hope. "Let him try," she said. "What harm could it do?" They led Kofi through the hospital's narrow halls, past curious stairs, to a private room where Madame Akojua lay. The woman, once a towering figure in Ahmedzov, was frail, her breathing shallow, an oxygen mask over her face. Kofi stood by her bed, his worn sandals leaving faint dirt marks on the floor. He closed his eyes and began to sing. Kofi's voice was soft at first, like the rustle of palm leaves in the evening breeze. The words were simple, a tree lullaby his mother used to sing, * "Even when the stars hide, there's light in your heart. Come back to us." * The room, heavy with the scent of antiseptic and despair, seemed to shift. Adwoa froze. Kojo, who had scoffed earlier, stepped closer, his clipboard forgotten. Madame Akojua's fingers twitched. Then her hand moved. A nurse gasped. The doctor, who had been checking charts outside, rushed in. "Her pulse is stronger," he whispered, stunned. Kofi kept singing, his voice rising, weaving hope into every note. Slowly, impossibly, Madame Akojua's eyes fluttered open. She turned her head and stared at the boy, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't be why morning," the hospital buzzed with whispers. The orphan boy woke Madame Akojua with a song. Villagers gathered at the gates, curious and skeptical. Kofi was given a cot in an empty room, a plate of jollof rice, and a clean shirt, luxuries he hadn't known in years. But he only asked one thing: "Can I sing for her again?" Over the next 2 days, Kofi visited Madame Akojua, holding her hand and singing. Sometimes she slept, her breathing steady. Other times, she listened, her gaze softening as if his voice reminded her of something long lost. On the 3rd day, she spoke. "Boy," she rasped, "your voice pulled me back from the edge." Kofi smiled. "You needed to hear it more." Word of Kofi's miracle spread through Ahmedzov like wildfire. The village market hummed with gossip. That boy who used to beg for fish. He's the one who saved Madame Okojoa. But not everyone was pleased. Kofi's aunt, ESI, heard the news and stormed to the hospital, her wrapper flapping like a warning flag. "I'm his family," she declared to the nurse, her voice dripping with false concern. "I've been searching for him." Behind the curtain, Kofi overheard and froze. ESI, the woman who had called him cursed, who had left him to starve, was back. His hands trembled, but he stayed silent. Madame Okojoa, now sitting up in her bed, overheard the commotion. She summoned ESI to her room. "You're his aunt?" she asked, her voice sharp despite her frailty. ESI nodded, all smiles. "I've missed my nephew." Madame Okojoa's eyes narrowed. "Funny. He told me his family abandoned him, called him cursed." "Know anything about that?" ESI stammered, but Kofi stepped forward. "She's lying," he said quietly. "She said I brought death to my parents." The room fell silent. Madame Okojoa waved a hand. "Leave," she told ESI. "And don't come back." Security escorted ESI out as she shouted, "You'll regret this, Kofi." That evening, Madame Okojoa called Kofi to her side. "Why did you sing for me?" she asked. Kofi shrugged. "I had a dream once. I sang to a woman who was dying, and she lived. I knew it was you." Madame Okojoa's eyes softened. "You gave me hope when I had none. Now let me give you a home." Days later, she adopted Kofi, shocking the village. The boy who slept under trees now lived in her sprawling compound, enrolled in school, and began training as a mechanic, his dream to fix cars and make things run again. But darkness lingered. Madame Okojoa's nephew, Kwesi, a greedy man who had expected to inherit her wealth, watched the news with a scowl. "A street boy in her will," he muttered. "Not while I'm alive." One night, Kofi found a bowl of banku in his room. It smelled off. He didn't eat it. The family cook, alarmed, sent it for testing. Traces of poison were found. Security cameras were tampered with, and the maid who served it had vanished. Kofi's heart raced. Someone wanted him gone. Days later, Madame Okojoa collapsed during a meeting with her farm managers. The hospital became her home again, her condition critical. Kwesi seized his chance, arriving with a new will that named him trustee of her estate until Kofi was 21. The staff protested, but the documents seemed legitimate. Kwesi moved into the compound, sneering at Kofi. "This house is mine now," he said. Kofi, now 13, felt his world crumbling again. But his street instinct hadn't faded. One night, he overheard Kwesi on the phone. "The old woman won't wake up. The boy's next." Kofi recorded it. The next morning, Kofi stood in the compound's courtyard, the recording device in hand, flanked by Madame Okojoa's lawyer and a police officer. "Kwesi," he said, his voice steady, "you're done." The recording played, exposing Kwesi's plot. He was arrested for fraud and attempted murder, his screams fading as he was led away. That evening, Kofi sat by Madame Okojoa's bedside. The doctors gave her hours. He took her hand and sang, his voice breaking through the sterile air, "The road may end, but the heart keeps walking. Come back to me." Her fingers stirred. Her eyes opened. "Kofi," she whispered, "you're my son." Months later, Kofi's story was everywhere. Orphan boy saves Cocoa Tycoon with song. At 18, he became Ghana's youngest certified mechanic, fixing cars with precision and singing at community events to lift spirits. Madame Okojoa, fully recovered, opened a music therapy center with Kofi, called Harmony Haven, for those battling despair. Kofi married Oma, a teacher who loved his heart as much as his voice. They had a daughter, Efua, and lived in the Amadzuf compound, where joy replaced fear. Madame Okojoa never let him leave. "This is your home," she said. And under the Ghanaian stars, Kofi sang, his voice a beacon of hope.